I'm going to be giving you some sense of how to use the GMAT online whiteboard. Uh, First of all, let us look at it. There are a couple of options in front of us. So we either wait for the test centers to open up, correct? Or we, continue using the whiteboard. So this could potentially be something that may last for a lot longer, correct? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to analyze what is the best way for us to work using this tool. All right. So excellent. Whether it's good afternoon or good evening, I'm not sure, right? So it's about 4:30, so I would probably default to good evening. Very warm welcome to all of you. Um, let's just get some basic housekeeping out of the way. So there is a chat window. So all of you see the chat window. Go ahead and let me know if there is anything that you want to kind of just type there. But it's typically for general queries. If you have any questions that you want me to answer, you can post it on the Q&A box. So you see the top icon, it says Q&A. So you can go ahead and let me know in the Q&A box. We hope that there are no power outages. I hope that the internet stays faithful. Okay. In case it doesn't have, I also have one of my colleagues, Manisha. So Manisha is also going to be helping me on this webinar. So Manisha, maybe you can just go ahead and say hi in the chat window so people get to know you're here. And she will also be posting some important links. So just kind of be a little careful on that. So make sure that you kind of copy those links. And we are going to kind of keep it short. So I would like to keep bulk of it with an actual, usage of the tool. So I will show you what are the things, what are the strategies that we can use, with the tool, correct? So my request is if you can just shut all the other tabs, okay? And if you can pay attention on this webinar for the next 40 to 45 minutes, you will gain a lot more than any other distraction that you're right now looking at, okay? So let's practice some mindfulness. Let's be here and now. My name is Arun Jagannathan. You probably have seen me on YouTube. You probably have seen my posts on maybe GMAT Club or followed me. So this is my LinkedIn ID. Please add me on LinkedIn. I'm glad to stay connected with you guys. And the other thing about getting connected with me on LinkedIn is the moment you connect with me, you automatically have access to all the 11,000, 12,000 connections that I have, many of whom are students who have gone to a top school, right? So get to enrich your network. So let's make it a win-win for everyone. You can also write to me. My email address is arunj@crackverbal.com. I might redirect specific queries to someone in my team, but I will make sure that your queries get answered. All right. Coming to what we have in agenda, I wanted to give you some free resources, talk a little bit about what we do at CrackVerbal, and then get directly into, what should we do, how should we use the GMAT online whiteboard, along with some tips to help you guide with your prep. So once we kind of have a demo of the GMAT online whiteboard, I'll also be giving you very specific tips to maximize your verbal, QUANT, and IR sections, correct? So I'll make sure that I do that. And finally, we will try to keep the last 10-15 minutes for Q&A. So that is, if you have any specific questions, I'd be glad to answer those for you. Here are some of our students who have done very well this year, but more importantly, they have also gotten admit to top school. So we are also bringing many of them on our social media channels. So for example, Guru Simran we have a YouTube video where he spoke about his experience getting into Tepper Business School this year. We had a Insta Live session last weekend on Vipin, who shared his experience of getting into Johnson School of Business. So one of the things that we are also trying to do at CrackVerbal is all the students who have been successful either on the GMAT or getting into a top school, we are trying to get them to come out and speak and say what has been the experience like for them. And a lot of this, along with our own expertise, you can find. So one of the things that I wanted to give for people who are attending today's session, and Manisha, you can probably just click on this. So you see the particular link over here. So this is a course. It is actually called How to Study for the GMAT, right? What we have noticed is a lot of times students get a lot of theory. If you go to GMAT Club, if you go to YouTube for that matter, even CrackVerbal, we give plenty of free resources. But what happens is students sometimes struggle because the problem is not material. The problem is not questions. Sometimes it is just the discipline of how do I sit for 2 hours and how do I make this into a habit? How do I create that consistency in my preparation, correct? So we have a lot of advice that we have put up on this course. In fact, it has about 20 videos, right, where we have used a lot of, for example, there are some management techniques. We talk about the Pomodoro technique of how to manage your time when you're sitting 25-minute sprints, where you do 25 minutes of question solving, take a 5-minute break, and then do another 25 minutes of analysis. So we have a lot of valuable advice, so you can get access to that free course. So go ahead and please use the link that Manisha has shared with you. And in case you have not done so already, please follow us on YouTube. So we got tons of content. I was mentioning about Guru Samran getting into Tepper. It's there. Topics like, should you be even investing in an MBA program during recession, correct? And we have, our analysis on the interim GMAT, about whether you should be applying in R4. Many schools have started saying that we don't even need a GMAT score if you are applying in R4. So we are also going to be talking about that. So please follow us on that. And, we also have resources on our website. So we have ebooks, we have videos, and we also have a great blog where we put out a lot of content. So just copy the links that Manisha is sharing with you, right? And I just wanted to let you know, in case you are preparing for the GMAT, every weekend I have my live sessions. I have 2 batches that are currently going on. Some of you may already be my students. We use a very similar format. We use the Zoom, and you could use the link that Manisha has just pasted in case you are interested in attending one of the sessions. This weekend, I think I have sentence correction and critical reasoning. So in case you're preparing for sentence correction and critical reasoning, I got some, awesome content coming up where we look at various strategies for cracking the GMAT. All right, so let's get started, okay? And I usually tend to be a little fast in the way I speak because I have a 10-minute timeline for the first initial bit so that we can dive directly into the content, okay? So first question that I have for you is, why is it that you need to take the test now, correct? So I'm imagining that there are 3 possible scenarios at play over here, correct? So the first thing that you're looking at is you're probably looking at taking the GMAT because you have time in your hands, correct? Maybe you're working from home, maybe you're in between jobs, maybe you've graduated from college and you think this is the best time for you to prepare. So that is option number 1, okay? Option number 2 is you probably have started preparing for the GMAT and you may have booked your date sometime in May, not knowing that this whole COVID situation is going to explode, correct? So if you have been preparing from, let's say, Jan, so you prepared in Jan, Feb, March, and you thought, okay, let's say by April, May, I take the test, right? So that's option number 2, correct? I don't know how many of you are in option number 2. And then there is option number 3. Option number 3 is that right now you understand that as the world is looking at a kind of an economic recession, okay? And as industries are changing, just yesterday I was having a chat with one of my students, Pratyaksh, who got into Ross Business School this year. And he was telling me that, in the automobile sector, the next 2 years is going to be chaotic. Correct? There are so many things that are happening. And I see that in hospitality, I see that in aviation, I see that in real estate, I see that in so many different industries where the industry itself is changing. Now, what happens is when you are going to be in the industry in such a state of flux, right? You might be hit by the economy, which might mean that you could lose your job, or your things are not going the way you had planned things. The advantage of doing an MBA at this point would be that you end up applying in 2020, okay? 2021, let's just look at it from a timeline perspective. 2021 is when you're going to get admission. I'm not talking about the R3, R4 deadlines. I'm just saying if you were to apply, let's say, later this year. If you're going to be applying in, let's say, October, you get admission for next September. That is 2021 September, okay? Which means you graduate in 2023. I hope all of you understand that people who are studying for the GMAT in 2020, they will be coming back to the workforce in 2023. According to me, that would be the perfect time because even if you take conservative estimates of when they are going to find a vaccine, you're looking at about 2 years. People say 12 to 18 months, but let's assume it's about 2 years, which means that if you're looking at a vaccine coming out in 2022, right, you still have the economy, which is going to take maybe 1 more year to kind of come back. So 2022, if you're looking at a 1-year program, 2023, if you're looking at a 2-year program, okay? So that, according to me, is the best time for you to kind of come back because the economy is on a resurgence. Number 2, you also have spent this time investing in yourself, correct? You have spent this time, working on your, CV, on your resume. So you come with the right brand credentials back to the market, correct? I think that's a fantastic way to look at this whole situation. Instead of becoming negative, let's try to be positive. The second point is, with regards to the online, whiteboard itself, and I'm going to be getting into this a little bit into. I'll be getting into that shortly. But well, I've had one question that a lot of students have asked, which is, Arun, how long will the online GMAT exam be? So today they have put a date of June 15th. Okay. Now here is my guesstimate. Okay. If you are taking this test in India, there are 3 zones. Today afternoon, the government of India, the central government, released the red zone, the orange zone, and the green zone. Okay. So the green zone, the centers may be open. Okay. The centers may be open in the green zone, but definitely not in the red zone. So let me give you an example. You have heard of, let's say, the kind of numbers that we are seeing in Mumbai or Delhi. I do not see how Mumbai or Delhi is going to actually have the GMAT testing centers open by June 15th, right? So I think the testing centers in some parts of the country, such as Mumbai and Delhi, might be closed. But let me give you another example. Let's take Vellore, okay? So Vellore in Tamil Nadu. So there is a GMAT testing center inside Vellore Institute of Technology, that is VIT, correct? Now, if let's assume, I have not checked the data, but let's assume that Vellore comes under the green zone. So it may happen that they may allow the testing to happen in Vellore Center, but they may have the Andheri Center in Bombay or the Connaught Place Center in Delhi closed, right? So that's how I see this. So what is going to happen in the red zones or the orange zones, right? I do not see the test centers opening by June 15th. I think it might stretch a little bit into July, August as well, correct? So I would really want you to consider taking the online test and let us not fear this whiteboard, okay? So I will tell you a couple of things that might help, okay? But really don't fear the whiteboard, and I have a few reasons for that, okay? So first of all, some basic hygiene factors. So there is a system test that you have on mba.com. So make sure that you run that a test, a day before your test day, correct? to ensure that your system is compliant with what the GMAT requires. And from what I have heard of from students who have taken the test or who have booked the test, any normal Windows laptop or a Mac, like a MacBook Air or something, works perfectly fine. The internet connection required also is as low as 1 Mbps, so you can keep it as, let's say, a few Mbps just to be on the safe side. Okay. The online whiteboard has been released by the GMAC. I'm going to be showing you that screen very shortly, but make sure that you log in about 30 minutes before the test starts, because there are some procedures. By the way, I hope you all understand that the test timings are not as sacrosanct as it was in the test center, which means that if you have booked a 1 p.m. slot, it is very much possible that your test could become start at 2 p.m. Okay. Because first the proctor has to come and he will examine your room. You have to upload your passport document, which is what is required in India as the proof. So you upload your passport, you let the proctor examine the room. In some cases, the proctor also examines certain apps that are running on your system. So basically, he will take control and he will look at the apps. If there are certain apps that he wants you to close, you may want to go to the control panel, to your system panel, and specifically close those applications. One thing that I've gotten as a feedback from one of the students who took the test is he said that his proctor was not very knowledgeable. Now, I just want to give you this in context that this is just one student was told that, okay? But, the proctor may not necessarily know exactly, certain things. Like, for example, if there is a particular application running, he may expect you to close it. He may not necessarily know what that application does or does not do, okay? So this is the prep before the exam. The other thing that may happen is, let us say that there is delay, especially if you're booking the test during your lunch time or evening time. Just assume that there is a 1 hour buffer, correct? Because remember, you can't be eating anything during the test. So don't push it around too much, okay? So make sure that you keep it away from the time that you would normally be eating, okay? All right, so now let's come to the main point, which is how do I use the whiteboard? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be showing you like a demo of the whiteboard of how it appears on mba.com. So what you see over here is how it appears on mba.com, correct? So I'm going to be entering the full screen mode. So let's see how this works. Okay. Now, a couple of things for us over here. So the first thing is, you see there is a pen and pencil, and then there is an eraser, right? So one thing that you can do is you can even change your background color. So the default is like a grayish color, but you can choose the color to be white. Okay, so you can pick a color to be a very clear color, or you could probably pick a color. So for example, yeah, I think it's the fill. So you could also have, I'm just trying to pick, okay, so the background color seems to be, yeah. So I think let's just go to the pencil part. So the pencil over here, right? Our recommendation is, you see this eraser, you can actually keep the eraser to 5. So there are 5 sizes over here: size 1, size 2, size 3, size 4, and size 5. So recommendation is to keep the eraser at size 5, so that what happens when you are rubbing out something from the screen, it kind of rubs out a greater space. But when it comes to the pencil, the recommendation is to keep it at about 3. So what happens is, whatever you're writing on the screen, right, is a lot larger, correct? A couple of things over here is you also have a text box, right? So you can be typing in your text over here on the screen, okay? There are various images that we can use for things like geometry, correct? So I'm going to make it white again. So things like geometry, you could use these various shapes. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be talking about each topic. So let me first start with quant, right? So before you start the test, right, what you can do is you can do one of two things. So the first thing that you can do is you can possibly write down your pacing onto the screen, right? So what is the pacing that you can have is you have 31 questions and you are expected to do it in 62 minutes, which means the way it works is for every 5 questions, you are expected to do it in about 10 minutes, which means that if you're in question number 5, or rather you're in question number 6, okay, you are expected to be in, you're expected to be left with about 50 minutes, correct? Remember, it's a countdown timer, correct? Let's say 40 minutes if you're on question number 11, because I'm taking chunks of 10, okay? I'm going to add 5 more, so that makes it 30 minutes left. You are on question number 21. You are, having 20 minutes left. You are on question number 26. You have 10 minutes left. At this point, it doesn't make sense for you to write any further, because obviously you will be left with 0 minutes at the end of 31 questions. So my suggestion is that you write down your pacing chart, okay, before you start the quant section. So what happens is you have the pacing chart right in front of you, okay? I also want to show you this other thing, which is the pan tool. So the pan tool essentially can be moved around. So you can actually, if you see, it's actually infinite scroll, correct? So you can actually go ahead and, yeah, so I think I just pressed on the back button. Let me just go back to the online whiteboard. So the pan tool basically lets you kind of go across the screen, right? So you can actually use the rest of the white space to actually do your rough work, okay? One more thing that I would advise is for something like data sufficiency, correct? So we know that the answer option could be A or C, and the answer option would be B or D, or it could be E. So you could even write this down as A, C, B, D, E, and as you cannot go solving the questions, you end up using the marker to essentially go ahead and cross out answer choices that you think are incorrect, right? So this is one way in which you can use it for data sufficiency, okay? Now, coming to verbal, right? So what is it that we have in verbal? So the first thing that I would suggest is write down your pacing chart for verbal. So what is the pacing chart that I recommend for verbal is, let me just write it down over here. So this is the pacing chart. So what we need to do is we need to solve 9 questions in about 15 minutes, correct? So we solve about 9 questions in 15 minutes, which means you are, at like 9 questions, you should approximately be left with about 15 minutes, correct? Because you have a 65-minute test. So by the time you're in question number 18, you should be roughly with about 35 minutes. If you are on question number 27, you are roughly left with about 20 minutes, correct? If you are able to manage this, so that basically will mean that by the time you get to question number 36, you will end up using it. Now, if you notice one thing, I am basically giving a pacing chart which is roughly 9 questions I'm expecting you to do in 15 minutes, correct? Since we have 36 questions on the GMAT, you would imagine that it is going to be 15 into 4, which is about 60 minutes. What happens to the extra 5 minutes? The extra 5 minutes is your buffer time, correct? What it means is See, you can't possibly be exactly, left with 50 minutes left, okay, when you're question number 9, or left with exactly 35 minutes when you're question number 18, or left with exactly 20 minutes when you're question number 27. My hope is by the time you reach question number 27, if not 20, you should be left with at least 15 minutes, correct? So that 5-minute buffer you can utilize anywhere on the test, okay? Now coming to specifically sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. So let's look at all three of them. So the first thing is, for all questions, I would like you to write down the A, B, C, D, E vertically, okay? So when you write down vertically, remember there is no copy function, so you can't copy it and paste it multiple times. This is something that we teach in our sentence correction classes around how we should go about treating GMAT as a process of elimination, not as a process of selection, correct? So what you need to do is, once you have kind of got this, right, you essentially go ahead and eliminate answer options that you think are not correct. What you're left with is the right answer choice. Now, this thing you would have actually done using a paper and a pen, in which case you need to be writing A, B, C, D, E all over again. However, here is the great thing. On the GMAT, right, you have an advantage, which is you can just go see this back button, like the undo button. So once you have done using this, you can click undo 4 times, correct? So what will happen? The A, B, C, D, E comes back right in front of you. Okay, so that's another important thing for you to remember for sentence correction. Now, coming to critical reasoning. For critical reasoning, please do not use the pen feature. For reading comprehension, do not use the pen feature. What you need to do is, you can, for example, in critical reasoning, one of the advice that we give is write down the main conclusion. So after you have read the stimulus, okay, you could say the plan will be a success. Maybe this is what we want to, let's say, weaken, correct? So just try to put the main conclusion in the form of a text, right? And that is the only thing that I can imagine using the text for. In the case you are going to be doing it for reading comprehension, okay, what you can do is, again, this is a technique that we teach in the class, the technique of the mapping. So you could be using a paper and a pen for mapping, but over here you would actually be typing it out. For example, theory about, forget the spelling mistakes, right? Volcanic eruption, okay, something against the theory, examples of current research. Maybe this is how your map is going to look like, correct? So, again, on RC, you have an advantage. You can actually type out your map in the form of a text, right? So I just wanted to show a little bit of the screen to you. So what I will now do is, I'll go back to the part where we were discussing what are the things that we need to keep in mind when we are using the whiteboard, correct? The first thing is, remember, the whiteboard will open in the same window in which the questions appear, which means, if you were to go back to the time when GMAT was administered as a paper and a pen test, and here is a trivia for you. I know about the paper and pen test because in '97, that is 23 years ago, I actually took the paper and pen test for the GMAT, right? Back then I was more of a student, right? And one of the biggest challenges that we heard when GMAT went online was people complaining that, "Arey, scratchpad will be on my table, but my eyes will be on the screen." Correct? So now we have an advantage, which is the online whiteboard can actually be kept next to you when you see the questions. Okay? By default, it is open. My suggestion is there is no need for you to close it. So I would suggest that you keep it open. but you kind of drag and drop it and keep it in a place where you are able to see both the questions and the whiteboard. Okay, so the whiteboard is kind of docked to your screen. You can type using your keyboard and draw using your mouse. What I just showed you using the screen, I actually used my touchpad on my laptop. It's a MacBook Air 15-inch, so I use the touchpad over there, right? I'll be taking the questions in the end. Okay, so I will be so please just wait for me to kind of complete. I hope to answer your questions and then take it in the Q&A part. Okay. So you can change the size of the whiteboard window. So maybe you want to also kind of understand that it will be kept in one corner, right? And remember that the notes won't disappear after each question, which means that you have the notes with you for the duration. There is one button I didn't show you, but there is one option over there which is clear screen. Okay, if you do that clear screen, it will clear everything. But apart from that, you have the eraser for you to rub out certain things on the whiteboard. Okay, what are the overall challenges? The first challenge is please start using the whiteboard as soon as the test starts, correct? And immediately change your preferences. Like I told you, the eraser size, keep it at 5. The pen size, keep it at a 3 or a 4. You can write down your pacing chart for quant before you get started. Similarly, for verbal, you can put down your pacing chart while you have the first question appear in front of you. Okay. And you can't be using it before the test starts. Okay, just to clarify, I'm saying once the test starts. One thing that people have asked is, can I use an external device like a notepad or like a bamboo pad, right? You cannot be using any other device. The only two input device that is allowed by GMAT is a mouse and your keyboard, correct? My personal suggestion is, if you can buy an external mouse, or if you have an external mouse, it works a lot better than with a trackpad. So internally at CrackVerbal, our team, we tested out using external mouse and a trackpad, and the external mouse wins hands down, at least for us, because the trackpad, especially in Mac, when you have 2 fingers, 3 fingers, like you saw what happened earlier, right? Like I kind of swiped and then it ended up going to another screen. So make sure that you get a lot of practice using the mouse, drawing things, especially on quant. I'm going to be talking about that shortly. Here is the other thing that the student mentioned. So what he said was, Arun, the fact that there is one toolbar, there is a whiteboard, but apart from that, you also have a small video which will essentially be a capture of your face, correct? So just try taking the test with a small video image of yourself. So if anybody has been on a Zoom video call, or on a FaceTime call or on a WhatsApp video call, we tend to be slightly narcissistic and we tend to look at how our face is looking, correct? So he said, Arun, it looks odd, but it was just kind of distracting for me. And also what happened is, the fact that the proctor is watching, so you have a place by which you can communicate with the proctor on chat, okay? You can also enable and you can talk to him, correct? So the proctor will be there. So that's another thing that sometimes people feel a little uncomfortable saying, that when I'm solving a question, to know that there will be someone watching me do it can get a little uncomfortable. Sorry, I think the animation's got a little messed up. So one of the things is, please do not do the math in your head, okay? Please do not do the math in your head. Kindly use the online board. Let us better get used to it. I have had students come to me and say, should I start learning Vedic maths, right? That's what they teach for CAT. Please don't do all that, right? It's just not going to help. Start using the online board, okay? My advice is, use that for like at least 2 to 3 tests. Please take it with the online board. All your practice that you're going to do from OG, try to use the online board. I know this sounds painful, but I believe that if you keep doing that for the next 1 week, okay, you won't believe, it's the power of consistency and discipline is enormous. I feel that 1 week you keep practicing. For example, in our team, we have been practicing for the last couple of days because we wanted to give suggestions to our students on what are the other things we could do. And one thing that I have realized is that I have gotten a little bit more comfortable. So instead of us fighting and complaining, I think it's very easy to have this negative feeling ki why would GMAT do this to us, correct? It's almost like we play the victim card, right? But one thing that I would like to tell you, so actually 3 things that I would like to tell you is, number one, if you are going to take the interim GMAT and you have a disadvantage, remember everyone who's taking the interim GMAT will have a disadvantage, correct? You would agree with that. Now, most B schools will require the data on what is the average scores for interim GMAT. See, I know this because even after the number of questions and all that changed, these schools wanted to know whether GMAT is still as consistent, whether the scores from 1 year ago to the scores 1 month ago to the scores today, whether all of them are equal. Correct? So think about it. You are a B school. You don't want to, unnecessarily subject a student who took the online test to unfavorable result. So you are going to be asking that from GMAT. So GMAT will publish that data, maybe not to the general public, but it will definitely be publishing this data to the B schools. Okay. Which means that if the average GMAT score today is, let's say, a 560, and with the interim GMAT, let's say the average drops down to like a 500, correct? So it means that you get some kind of a 60-point buffer or a 60-point cushion. GMAT will not give you this. I want you to understand. Officially, GMAT will not come out and say this. However, GMAT would kind of give that data to the B school. And the second point I wanted to mention was, in your B school application, there is a space for you to write what is called as optional essay, correct? So I would strongly recommend that you use the optional essay and you write about how your plans to take the GMAT ended up with you taking the interim GMAT, and how as a result of it, you perhaps performed a little lower than what you are really capable of, correct? Point number 2. Point number 3 is, as I said earlier, that instead of fighting this and instead of feeling negative, I would say let's just go ahead and embrace it, and let's just try to see if we can get the GMAT out of the way, and so that life becomes a lot more easier, right? Let this online whiteboard not stop you, and the more you practice, the better you're going to get. Remember, you can resize the whiteboard, move it around wherever you're comfortable on the screen. For geometry, though, I think there is a huge advantage because you are able to draw a polygon, you are able to draw a circle, you are able to draw a straight line. So for such questions, the online pad would actually be beneficial for you. The only problem that I see is things like quadratic equation. Correct. So let us take an example. If I were to, let's say, use a quadratic equation, correct? Let me just use the pan tool, correct? So let me just pan it out so I can obviously move it around. So if I were to use a quadratic equation, so what is going to happen is for me to write things like x squared, correct? So let's say it is x squared minus 5x plus 6, right? So I have something like this, and then I'm going to say, well, you have x over here, and you have minus 3, minus 2. So see, I was able to do it. So there is a slight, it may be a slight delay, but overall, you know that, you still can be using it as you would use a normal pad. But coming specifically to the timing for quant, so I mentioned about the timing, so let me just go back and revisit this, right? So let us take the timing that we had. I think the pacing chart for quant, I will just write it again. So let us say that the pacing chart for quant is, as I mentioned earlier, okay? So this is pacing chart for quant. I say that I would be on question number 11, as I said, at the end of, sorry, question number 6. Then I have question number 11. So it's basically, 5n plus 1, right? That's the formula. So 16, then you have 21, then you have 26, then obviously it is 31. I don't need to write that. And because it is a countdown timer, which means your timer will not go from 0 to 61. It will go from 61 to 0, correct? So what will happen is, if you are on question number this, you should roughly have about 15 minutes left, correct? So here you will have 40 minutes left, correct? Here you will have 30 minutes left, correct? Here you will have 20 minutes left. And finally, you are going to walk in with the last 5 questions with 10 minutes left. So one thing that I wanted to let you know, that if you feel that your scoring itself is, for example, let's say that you realize that you are not able to solve it as fast as you would do with a pen and a paper, correct? The best way for us to salvage the situation, I know I'm using a very negative word, salvage the situation, but the best way for me to do it is not be left with 5 questions and 1 minute left. Okay, so this is something that I'm noticing with students who are practicing. What they are coming and telling is, Arun, I run out of time. But what is happening is they run out of time and they get to realize only when they have 1 minute left and 5 questions. Remember, the way the GMAT algorithm is structured, that you will get heavily penalized if you get a string of mistakes, if you make a string of mistakes in one chunk. So what may happen is, you may be scoring, let's say, a 15 quant, correct? But because you made a string of mistakes, in the end, GMAT could push you down to a 48 or a 49, correct? So here is what I would say. The pacing, correct? So this is what you need to do. Make sure that, you are interspersing your guesses, okay? Now, when do I guess? I will guess in one of 2 scenarios, okay? Scenario number 1 that I'm going to guess is when I know that this particular question is going to be very calculation intensive, correct? So for example, if you have, even if it's a simple question from time, speed, distance, but then you have this circular route and you have, objects moving towards each other, against each other, and you know that you have to write a bunch of equations, maybe that's a good question for you to guess. So while you are practicing from the OG, while you are taking the full-length test, it may be a good idea for you to see if there are specific questions you would like to guess. The second thing that I would suggest is also guess on questions that you're not very confident. See, anyways, let's say that you are not going to be, let me give the example of verbal, okay? So let me give the example of verbal, right? So this is the pacing chart that I suggested for verbal, correct? Now, let us say that you are not able to do 9 questions in 15 to 20 minutes, correct? Let us say that you start with 7 questions in 15 minutes. That's perfectly okay. Okay, so you can still do 7 questions in 15 minutes, but make sure that you're making your mistakes early on. So what it means is, the 6 questions for which you don't have the time, okay, those 6 questions are actually, let's say, question number 9, question number 13, question number 20, question number 23, question number 27, question number 30, correct? So it's better that you kind of spread out your mistakes than to keep all of it, towards the end, right? That's my advice, or that's what we have for the quant. One thing about verbal that I would like to tell is, there is no break between quant and verbal. I hope all of you know that. So there is no break. So it means once you do quant, you directly jump into verbal. So sometimes, students find that, like, I just solved my last question in quant, right? And immediately after that, I'm looking at my first, let's say, critical reasoning question. right? So there is some bit of context switching. Have you heard of this term, context switching? Like your brain was still thinking maths, now suddenly it has to start thinking verbal, right? So first of all, don't end up utilizing all your mental energy in quant. Okay, this is something that we teach in our course, that we are preparing for the GMAT test day. And on the GMAT test day, the way you solve the question, it is not enough to ask whether you will be able to get the answer. What is also equally important is that you ask, can I get it in the most optimized manner? Correct? Can I get it in the most efficient manner? So I hope you still have some mental energy left for verbal, because remember, here you're going to get 4 passages, correct? So that's going to consume a lot of your mental energy as well, right? So be careful on that. Secondly, clear the whiteboard. Like I told you, there is an option below which says clear. So after you're done with quant, you can just go ahead, clear the whiteboard, write down your pacing chart. You may not want to write it in the first or the second question, but whenever you feel comfortable, just make sure you write down the pacing chart. And as I told you, the 5 answer choices vertically. And as you keep solving and as you keep striking out, eliminating the wrong answer choices, and you get to the right answer choice, go to the undo button and undo the 4 crosses that you have put over your answer options. Last thing is, the text box that I showed you. Remember that text box can be resized. Okay, so one thing that a student did is, he assumed that the text is only the width that is given by default. So he started pressing enter, and we started getting something. So you can stretch it, drag it to such a way, especially if you're writing your reading comprehension map, or if you're writing your critical reasoning main conclusion. Whenever you're doing those kind of things, you can resize the text box as well. Last couple of things, and then we will go into the Q&A. So IR, you will have a break before you get into IR. So you're going to do quant, and then you're going to get into verbal. Post that, you're going to get into IR. Very important, utilize your break wisely. Remember, this is the 5 minutes that you get. So stretch yourself, because the other thing that I've heard from students is just looking at the screen, on the laptop for, the period of time can, kind of be a little draining. So, you can go out, eat something, because it's already about close to 2 hours that you have been away. And let's assume that it took another half an hour to 1 hour, for the initial setup to happen, which means if you had your breakfast at 8, I'm just giving an example. Let's say you had your breakfast at 8:30, and you have a 3-hour, test, right? So what happens? You start the test at about 9:30. You're roughly at about 11:30 at this point, correct? So you had breakfast at 8 o'clock. It is 11:30. You might feel little hungry, so maybe grab something to eat. Manisha, maybe we can also share the blog that we had written on how to maximize for the test day, correct? So there are these 23 test day tips. You can maybe share that blog as well. So we have written a blog where I've told you what to eat, what to drink, when to wake up, when to sleep. Okay, so all of that is mentioned in the blog. Manisha will share that. Other thing, please do not stretch your break for more than 4 minutes. Remember that timer will start, which means at the 5th minute, the break, once it gets over, IR is going to automatically start. So make sure that you don't go out and take more time. Maybe you want to take a quick bio break. Maybe you want to just, stretch your, hands and legs to this. One other thing that I've heard from students is, what happens in IR, and this doesn't happen in verbal or quant as much, but it happens in IR. If you notice IR, the data is given to you and it's spread across the screen, correct? So the entire screen is kind of filled with that. So for that reason, it may happen that your whiteboard may be blocking. So while you're solving also, you may be required to drag and drop your whiteboard here and there just to make sure that you're not losing visibility. Okay, and in some question types like multi-source, writing can be tough. So even though you're using the text, if you have solved integrated reasoning, you know what I'm telling, right? So a lot of times we tend to draw tables and things like that. That could be tough. So my suggestion would be to guess those kind of questions on IR. Right? I will just conclude with some overall do's and don'ts. So don't lean on the table, no covering face, no talking loud. So they actually are going to be, the proctor is going to be seeing you, correct? So they want to make sure that there is no way in which you can cheat. So you can't even be talking out loud. You are not allowed to write or scribble anything before the sections begin, correct? So please make sure that you ensure for your proctor to direct you, and it's better to ensure that he doesn't, feel that there is anything fishy going on. In any case, for people who have taken the GMAT now, what I'm hearing is it is going to take up to 2 weeks for them to come back with the scores, because here is something interesting GMAT is doing. What they are doing is the video capture that they have, okay, the time that it took for you to solve the questions, they take all of these inputs and they have what is called as forensic analysis. I know it sounds complex, right? Like it looks like CID, right? That they are doing forensic analysis, but they want to see, for example, think about it. The online whiteboard is on the screen. The questions are on the screen. Would your eyes be looking anywhere else? Correct? So they are going to be looking at that kind of data. Like, is the test taker constantly looking somewhere else, right? Is there anything else that might compromise the integrity of the test? And as I said, please do not run any apps, especially any app that has screenshots. Okay, if you have anything that lets you take screenshots, please disable those apps, because the last thing that you want is that ends up compromising on your test. Right. So that's pretty much what I have. Thanks so much. We also have an on-demand course. The link that I gave, Manisha can share that link again. So that is the live program that I have, where I take the sessions on weekends. If you like what I spoke, the way I spoke, the online live class, I do it a little differently. Here it is more of a one-way street. Over there, we have more questions coming up. We also have an on-demand course. So Manisha may want to, you can give the link of the on-demand course in case you want to have a look. All right, so I'm going to be taking the questions. That's all I had. So I'm going to be taking the questions. So I have a couple of questions that I see over here. Just one second. I'll just go ahead and see the questions we have. So I need to get these questions to the main screen. So I think I'll just, so yeah, so let me just go ahead and see the questions. Just one second, I'm going to be sharing my screen again, but it's just that I'm not able to see the Q&A and the questions together. So let me just go ahead and kind of see that together. So yeah, so we cannot be using a stylus pen or a touchscreen enabled laptop. Okay, so we cannot be using either of those. We cannot be using Microsoft Surface. We cannot be using iPad. Okay, so all of those will not be allowed. Bluetooth mouse should be allowed. So I don't think there is a problem with the Bluetooth mouse. Arnav asked a question, can we run the test system even if you have not booked? The thing is, you can, I think you just need to go to mba.com and you can run the test. So please go to mba.com. You'll have your answer over there. Most of your, this should work. I don't see any problems. Is there any update on the offline examination? See, GMAT right now is going to sit tight. Okay. So I'm just going to be enabling my camera, so in case you're able to see me over here. So that's me, right? So I've been taking the session. I thought, let me just focus on what I had. So that's the first question. any official integrated whiteboard for. So Arnav, my suggestion is for you to take the GMAT prep tests, okay, the one that you have on mba.com, correct? That's something that you should be able to see. The problem that I see with the Bluetooth mouse could be the fact that there are certain things that are required. So yeah, so I think it's better to get that checked. Okay. Um, could you also help in answering? I have a question, which is how do I kind of I'm not sure whether I'll be able to answer this, which is how do I take two consecutive sections without the break? As I said, a lot of it also depends on your mental state, how you are able to kind of, focus while you're taking the test. Just one thing, I'm just trying to turn on the light so that there is more, little bit more brighter. One more question. Interim test can be taken only once, and I'm planning to take the test in May. So shall I go ahead and take the test or wait till June 15? My take would be take that test, but we really cannot see. These are all things that are very subjective. So we would get to know only if we actually have data around whether such a test. Whether offline would come back, when it would come back. As I said, we don't have those answers. So you are going to go with a sense of, a risk, okay? You can change online. So anybody who has booked the test, you will be able to change it, but they are not letting you directly transfer it. You need to go and cancel your offline test. You will get your $250 back. There is going to be no, deduction over there. And then you need to retake by booking your online test. So these are two different things. They are not related to each other. Okay. Whether Okay, so I think some of the other questions that I'm getting is whether I should wait. My take would be if you are preparing for the GMAT and if you have already hit a particular momentum, you have already gotten to a point where you are, let's say, done with 3 months of prep and you feel that you don't want to wait till June, July, my suggestion would be to consider the interim option. If you have just started your preparation or you are still on your way to preparing for the GMAT, my suggestion, wait till about June and let us see how it plays out. Correct? So I've had a question, is it possible that the proctor could be late? I have not heard of that particular problem where the proctor has been late, but remember that there is a human at the other end. And I was telling you that the student was kind of not very happy with the proctor because he was telling that yeah, proctor ko tum chahta nahi hai, yeah, he asked him some questions and the proctor said no, I have to go and check it. Right? So you expect the proctor to know everything. So don't assume that the proctor is a guy from GMAC. I think they probably have some guy who is, coming and, I mean, don't expect that guy to know everything, right? So that's one warning that I wanted to let you know. Yeah, so the proctor is going to be sitting in the US or wherever. You don't know who the proctor is. You can't even see the proctor. Okay, all that you will be able to see is your own video, like what you see right now, the small image of me, you will see something like that. Okay, so you're not going to be seeing the proctor. Okay, the proctor is not going to come to your house and sit next to you when you're taking the test. He is going to be somewhere and he's just going to be having a look at it. All right. So we are approximately 5:30. So I hope I was able to answer your questions. In case you like what you heard, in case you're preparing for the GMAT, please, you are welcome to join me this weekend. I have a couple of interesting topics in verbal that I'm going to be discussing. So I'll be glad to, have those. I just had a last minute question coming in. I'll just take the two last minute questions. How do I communicate with him? There are two ways to communicate. One is the voice channel. So you'll have a way by which you can speak with the proctor. The second is you can type. You can always use the type. There is a third thing. If you give him your mobile number, he can even call you. Correct? So that's also an option that he may call you. That's one other thing. Okay, but predominantly it is going to be through the interface. The test results will be declared about 10 days after you take the test. We have a detailed blog on interim GMAT. Manisha, maybe you want to share it one more time. So we have given all the details of what to expect. Today's session was more around the online whiteboard. We cannot be using an extended monitor. Even that is not allowed. As I said, they are very stringent on the kind of technology that they are saying. You can have a wired external keyboard. I don't see why that should be a problem. Okay. You will not be allowed to take the interim test more than once, but here is the deal. If you want to spend $200 one more time, my take is GMAT is not going to say no to you. See, the reason why they are saying that you should take it only once is because they don't know what is going to be the demand supply. So if there are only few slots and so many people are rushing to take the online GMAT, which is the thing that the GMAT is thinking in its head, that maybe people are going to come and we may not have enough proctors. That is the problem. But my take would be you should be able to take it. Okay, you shouldn't worry too much on that. All right. Excellent. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope this was useful, and I hope to hear from you very soon. Right. Take care, and let's stay in touch.